It is, of course, a great pleasure and privilege for us tonight to hear from Ambassador, Chaver HaKnesset, Professor, General Expert on all matters Israel and U.S.-Israel relationship, Michael Oren. Rather than reading the ambassador's long list of distinguished positions, degrees, accomplishments, etc., and in doing so, taking up all of our time for this evening, allow me to instead introduce him through a personal recollection, a personal memory. One of our favorite photos in the Schreier family household, one of my favorite memories, is a picture of a younger me lying next to my oldest son, Kobe, around 7 years ago when he was still very young, when he was still a baby. And in the photo, the two of us had fallen asleep reading. Each of us had a book strewn across our bodies as we slept. Across my son's body, you can see Margaret Wise Brown's classic, Goodnight Moon, a perennial favorite and staple of any child's library. And on me, you can see a favorite book of mine, a book entitled Power, Faith, and Fantasy, authored by tonight's guest speaker. I don't know how many of you have read Power, Faith, and Fantasy. I know many of you have read 6 Days of War and Ally. But if you have not, I really recommend you do so. It is a comprehensive history of this country's relationship with not just Israel, but the entire region, spanning the nation's entire history. And I will say it is my favorite Oren work, because it is a work that perhaps only he could write. Many people can write popular history. Many people can write scholarly history. Many people can write history from a single vantage point, or maybe even two. But it takes a unique talent to take a complex issue, see it from countless critical viewpoints, that of the scholar, of the parliamentarian, the diplomat, the soldier, and present it in an accessible, indeed riveting way to all. So that those of us who don't have those diverse experiences not only absorb information, but also gain genuine knowledge. Not only gain knowledge, but get a taste of true wisdom and depth of perspective. This current war has so many dimensions. There is a military component. There are political components, both internal Israeli and international. There are diplomatic components. There are experiential components. I just got back from a mission to Israel last week. And I don't think anyone is better qualified to speak about all of them than our guest speaker tonight. Now, just a few thank yous before I hand over the microphone. I want to thank our CPY Adult Ed Committee, to Yossi Sieb and Aviva Edelstein for making this event happen, as well as all of our adult education events that so deeply enrich our community. I want to give special thanks to Tully Pollack for connecting us with Ambassador Oren and his instrumental role in making tonight happen. Thank you, Tully. I want to thank tonight's sponsors, Chaya and Joe Schwartz, for making this event happen. And a very special thank you to NORPAC, who is co-sponsoring tonight's event as well. NORPAC is the largest pro-Israel political action committee in the U.S. They do amazing work on Capitol Hill and beyond. I have personally joined some of their lobbying missions, and it is a great privilege to partner with them tonight and in general. I want to thank all of you for joining us on this rainy Sunday evening, and most of all, I want to thank our guest speaker for joining us. Without further ado, Ambassador, Chaver HaKnesset, Professor, Doctor, best-selling author, and surely a whole lot more, Michael Oren.
No, not yet. Please, hold on. Wow, thank you, Rabbi Shai. I can't imagine you being any younger than you are now. What picture of that, you know? Toli and Nechama, thank you for, it's the first time I've ever seen you at lower than 35,000 feet. We sent the city next to each other in airplanes. And here we are. Can you hear that, Mike? Yeah, here. See? You might be younger, but I'm a little taller. So there.
Better hair, too.
Yeah. I'm glad we're laughing. I got to say, I'm deeply moved by the sight of you. I don't know. I'm very moved. Thank you. Thank you. History, who knows this like a historian? History can be very hard. History can be hard. And who knows how hard history can be than the Jewish people? We know how hard history can be. You can be a Jew in 1492 in Spain and wake up one morning and find out that the country in which your ancestors have lived for the last 1,000 years, that country doesn't want you anymore and you got to leave. You could be a German Jew in 1933 and wake up one morning and find out that Germany is no longer Germany, it's Nazi Germany. It's different. You could be an Israeli Jew in 1973 and wake up one morning and find out the Egyptian and Syrian armies have attacked you, and the reality on which your entire world rested is about to change in a profound and very disturbing way. And you could be a Jew on October 7th, 2023, and wake up one morning, as I did, and find out that the world that I knew, that you knew, was going to change. History can be hard, and when history is hard, nothing can prepare you for how hard history is going to hit you. It's going to be, those of you who are watching football today, you're going to be blindsided, all right? You're going to be tackled in a way that you could not have imagined. 2 nights before October 7th, I was in Dallas, Texas. I was giving a corporate speech to real estate people, not Jews. And I made a prediction. I said, in a very short time, Israel will be at war. Now, I am not a prophet. And there's only one thing worse than being a false prophet. It is being a correct prophet. Just read the book of Jonah. He wanted to get out of it too. All right? It's a no-win. Prophecy is a no-win proposition. Just isn't. But I'm not a prophet, but I understood why Israel would be going to war soon. And I've been briefing diplomats. I have weekly briefings with diplomats in Israel, telling them, brace yourself, we're going to war soon. Why? Because I was collecting the dots. Iran, Iran, Iran. The United States was trying assiduously to broker a peace agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The Iranians were looking at this in horror. Why? They were going to be confronted with a joint Saudi-Israeli strategic and economic front. They were talking about building a rail line between Haifa and Jeddah. You think the Iranians are just going to sit there and take that? You think they're quietly? You think the Iranians are going to sit there and let Saudi Arabia acquire nuclear power so they have a nuclear-powered Saudi Arabia on their border? No way. No way. They looked at Israel, and we were divided. We were divided in every possible way you could be divided. All right? My mother, who's still living in the same house I grew up in West Orange, New Jersey, I'm staying there tonight, she was a family therapist in her career, and she had a favorite saying, the presenting problem is not the problem. We had a presenting problem known as the judicial reform. All right? I understand you had some speakers here about it. Right? But that was just the presenting problem. The real problems were underneath. The real problems were underneath. It was Ashkenazi Jews versus Mizrahi Jews, and left versus right, and secular versus religious, and the center of the country, Greater Tel Aviv, versus the periphery. Every which way we were at each other's throats, and thousands of reservists saying they weren't going to report to duty. What do you think the Iranians saw when they saw this? Well, Israel's weak. And then they looked at the United States. The United States was polarized. The United States was paralyzed. The only thing Republicans and Democrats could agree on in Washington was not to get involved in another foreign military entanglement, particularly in the Middle East. So the Iranians had fears, and the Iranians saw opportunities. Why not trigger a little war in the Middle East, and this whole Saudi Arabian thing goes away? Brilliant. Right? That was my prophecy. I got one thing wrong. I thought it would break out with Hezbollah in the north. And here, I was not a prophet. I was sharing in the culpability of the Israeli government. Back in 2017, when I was in Knesset, when I was the deputy to the prime minister, one day the prime minister called me in and said, I got some very bad news for you. You are going to be in charge of Gaza. No kidding. I was charged with finding ways to improve the quality of life of the citizens, of the residents of Gaza. And so I did a crash course on Gaza, and I learned some really extraordinary things. I found that here's an area where the Iranians were willing to fight Israel to the last Palestinian, and we've seen how that's played out. We have Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, who's in the 18th year of his 4-year term, and is willing to fight Hamas to the last Israeli. Right? And then there's Hamas itself. Hamas doesn't give a feather about the people of Gaza, doesn't at all. Hamas uses and loses between 200 and 300 Palestinian children every year digging its tunnels. Those 300 miles of tunnels, they're done with kids, with spoons. Tunnels are made out of it, the sand, it's sandy soil. They collapse, kids die, nobody cares. Nobody cares. You know why there's no water in Gaza? You hear that all the time? You know, Israel's depriving Gaza of water. Israel doesn't deprive Gaza of water. We provide 7% of Gaza's water. There's no water in Gaza because every pipe sent into Gaza is cut up by Hamas and used for rockets. They dig those tunnels 200 feet deep beneath the aquifer. The aquifer dries up and fills up with salt water. That's why there's no water in Gaza. That's Hamas. We have the crossing, you know, Kerem Shalom, the ironically named Kerem Shalom, right? The Vineyard of Peace crossing, which has a capacity of 1,200 large flatbed trucks a day. We're talking about 200-300 trucks a day. We could do 1,200 of those trucks every day. Hamas would never let in more than 400 trucks because they wanted to keep the population hungry and angry and dependent on Hamas. That was Hamas. They would blow up Kerem Shalom. They blew up the fuel lines under Kerem Shalom. So why? There's no electricity in Gaza. Guess why? Because Hamas blew up the fuel lines. Everything you knew about human decency, about civilization, when it came to Hamas and Gaza, throw it out the window. And yet, and here's the big yet, we in the government, and when I say the government, I mean the army, I mean the Shabak, I mean the Mossad, all agreed that Hamas could be paid off. So we arranged to have very large pallets, not suitcases, pallets of cash from Qatar moved into Gaza. We let workers come in. About 20,000 Gazan workers came in every day. And we figured this would give Hamas something to lose. And we would focus on Hezbollah because that is where the war was going to break out, there. And we were wrong. And we were wrong, all of us. History hits you hard. It hits you hard when you least expect it, when you can't prepare yourself. Morning of October 7th, and I don't have to go through the litanies of the horrors. You know them all. You know the butchery, you know the savagery, the mutilations, the rapes, the immolations, and the hostage taking. And the hostage taking. Hamas hit us squarely between the eyes. And by eyes, I mean capital I, apostrophe the S. What are the eyes? We have two identities in the state of Israel. All right, we know we're Jewish and democratic, but we also have a twin defense identity. The state comes into being in 1948, 3 years after the Holocaust, almost to the date, 3 years after the Holocaust, May 1948, and with a promise that we were going to defend the state of Israel on the land of Israel. We're going to defend ourselves. We're going to defend our borders. These Arab armies are going to attack us. We're going to send them back where they came from. But there's another promise, that we will defend the people of Israel. And should those people fall prisoners, the state will do everything in its power to redeem them. And what were we supposed to do? If we fight Hamas, would we be risking the lives of all the hostages? How do we reconcile these two? You know, for 75 years they were perfectly compatible, but all of a sudden they're contradictory. These two goals, these two eyes of the Jewish state. And so we did a typical sort of Jewish Solomonic solution. We did a little bit of both. We said we're going to go into Gaza to defeat Hamas, and we're going to release the hostages. Even though we know at the end of the day Hamas won't release all of the hostages, because if it does, then we're really going to destroy Hamas. The only reason we're not flooding the tunnels with seawater, like the Egyptians did, is because they have hostages. And so they won't give up all the hostages. So at the end of the day, these two contradictory eyes are going to come to a terrible, terrible decision for the state of Israel. For me personally, that decision was still postponed. Shabbat morning, Simchat Torah, even though Shabbat morning people are calling everywhere and telling us what's happening, and I've got to get back to the state of Israel. Fortunately, for many years, through a relationship with the Paul Singer Foundation, whenever there's a crisis in Israel, they hire a PR firm, a great PR firm, and they put me on television. So if those of you who have seen me in television again and again and again, that's because of this wonderful company that has me going there. And already on that Shabbat, began to appear in all the different television stations, even though I didn't even know that much, as you didn't know that much. We thought there were, several dozen casualties, maybe several dozen hostages. We had no idea of the enormity, the gargantuan, horrific nature of this attack. And being on television And we're talking about 24/7 because your prime time, God bless you, is 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, our time. All right, and going down and say, 4 o'clock in the morning to Ashdod to meet Anderson Cooper, who I can't even say his name already at 4 o'clock in the morning, gives me a ringside seat into what is in essence one of the most crucial fronts in this war. Okay, there's obviously the military front. But the media here plays a crucial and perhaps even pivotal role. And if you're interviewing on CNN and MSNBC and BBC and CBC, okay, and they're tough, Canadians are tough. It was today, it was CBC. You see what Hamas is up to. And here is how it works. I'll explain it to you on the one-foot version of how Hamas works. Hamas has a military tactic. All right, it shoots at us. It tries to kill Jews. In this case, they killed a lot of Jews. And then they run back into Gaza and hide behind the civilian population. So they get credit for killing us. And then when we go to hit them, because they're using their population as a shield, we end up killing civilians there. All right, so that's the military tactic. They win twice. They win by killing us and then getting us condemned as war criminals. Now, the military tactic serves a media strategy. The press comes. Now, there's probably an algorithm out there that says how many days of media grace you get for every dead Jew. Terrible. 6 million Jews in the Holocaust bought us about 25 years in Europe. It changed in 1973, literally. All right. 1,200 dead Jews bought us about 2.5 weeks on American television and about a week and a half on European television. That's literally, I remember the day when it changed from focusing on our pain to Palestinian suffering, particularly the suffering of Palestinian children. And then it becomes relentless. That's all you see for 24/7, Palestinian suffering. Now, Hamas is doing this on purpose, and the media is an active participant with Hamas. What happens then? The media strategy becomes a diplomatic strategy. The pictures coming out of Gaza trigger protests throughout the entire world, all right? And the Arab street today is not in the Arab world. The Arab street is in London and Paris. Huge demonstrations. That puts pressures on these governments. And those governments then will go to the General Assembly, and later they'll go to the Security Council, whose decisions are binding, and they may vote for a ceasefire, to impose a ceasefire. That is where the media, diplomatic, and legal strategy come into being. Why? Because a ceasefire means that Hamas wins. A ceasefire means that Hamas gets away literally with mass murder. A ceasefire means that 250,000 Israelis who have been rendered homeless by this crisis cannot go back to their homes. You wouldn't go back to your homes if Hamas was allowed to reorganize and rearm and plan the next round, because they said they're going to plan the next round. They don't even hide it. They're going to do this twice, 3, 4 times, right? Again and again. Hamas wins. So if you want to understand the entire conflict, understand that Hamas needs a ceasefire. It's what all this hostage exchange is about. And to the life of me, I've been doing this for many years, I don't know how to stop it. I do not know how to stop the military tactic cum media cum diplomatic cum legal strategy. But my job, when I go out, to do battle on CNN, that sounds kind of strange, because there are actually tens and thousands of Israelis, women and men who are actually doing real battle. But my goal is to not win over hearts and minds. My goal is to gain time and space for the IDF to do its job. That's all we need. We have to give them time and space, because the world is going to try to constrict that time and space over and over again. When I wasn't interviewing, in those few hours when I could have slept but didn't, I was involved in 2 NGOs, which are interesting. One of them, I'm the president of an NGO that supports the border police, a close relationship with the border police, particularly bereaved families. We lost 58 policemen and women. I went to a funeral for this young policewoman, Asayig, Batal Asayig, 2 weeks in the army. She had a gun. These terrorists came onto the moshav where she was stationed. She charged at them with her gun. She killed 3 of them before they killed her, but she saved that moshav. Unbelievable. These policemen from every walk of life, every background, one after another. And when I wasn't going to funerals and shivas, oh God, anybody know the name Ofer Balva? Ofer Balva was a young American Jewish man from Rockville, Maryland, whose parents were Israeli, but when his friends went off to the University of Maryland, he went off and joined the Israeli army. He was sitting in Rockville on October 7th, heard this on the news, turned around, ran to the plane, got into his uniform, went up to the northern border, and was killed by a Hezbollah rocket in the second week of the war. That funeral, too. But I also went to visit the families of hostages. And that was really important because the state wasn't exactly functioning. And in many cases, I was the first to visit these hostages. And it wasn't heartbreaking, it was soul crushing. We can't even begin to describe what it was like. When you visit someone whose two daughters are captive there, Ella and Daphna. They got released today, those two daughters. Amazing. But you go visit another family, the Eshel family, whose daughter Roni was listed as a hostage. And a 19-year-old again, a soldier, and I guess last week they finally identified her body after 5 weeks it took to identify this poor woman's body. They thought she was a hostage. Many people hostages don't even know. They don't actually have actual proof where these hostages are or there are hostages. Noah Marciano, that name probably means something to you. Boy, her mother was extraordinary. What an incredibly strong woman, Adi Marciano. And they knew that she was a hostage. They knew. And I guess just over a week ago they found her body in Gaza. Also a 19-year-old soldier, 2 weeks in the army. So all this is deeply personal. I could go on and on tonight just with the people I knew. And so many people that I know that you knew. The rabbi who married my daughter, Rabbi Satsky, 2 beautiful sons, both of them reserve officers in the military. Shabbat morning, they heard about the attacks. They got into their uniforms. They went down to Gaza, and they were both killed on the same morning. A rabbi. The Kedem family. The family grew up with my kids in the same scout troop, the same chug for karate, Torah dojo, if you know it. And she, her husband, and 3 children were taken out and shot. You don't have words for this, and I'm sure we don't, and we shouldn't find words for this, because this defies language. This defies language. But Israel rose up. A level of volunteerism. Like you can't believe 80% of Israelis volunteered for something. Picking fruit. Giving blood. They finally said we have enough blood. I hope that's true. Bringing food to soldiers. They finally said enough. We have no room for the food. 360,000 reservists reporting for duty. Most units reported a percentage of reporting for duty of 150%. 150%. That's extraordinary. What country in the world is like this? That'd be equivalent to 35 million Americans reporting for duty. Can you imagine that in any other country? What a society. And so brave. I was an old paratrooper in my day, a lone soldier, and I went to visit my old unit. They were there on October 7th, these paratroopers, these young guys, and they were going back into battle. And I went to give them a talk, a chizuk. They gave me a chizuk. But these young boys, gorgeous kids with guns, they're children. And I saw the fear in their eyes, and we sat and talked about that fear and how they can overcome it, because I've been in a few of these wars, and in Gaza too, and they took my breath away, these young men. They were so brave, going out to defend their country, and knowing. 2 of them were killed about 4 days ago, 2 of the boys I spoke to, from the 890th Paratroop Brigade. And then, in this country, I've been traveling around the United States. I don't know if this is my 11th or 12th city in 2 weeks. And been speaking mostly about Hatzalah. Eli Beer, I'm sure. And Hatzalah used up 90% of its medical wares of our stores in the first 2 days. So we had to replenish these stores very, very quickly. So that's why I'm here. Excuse me, but see, talk about medical stores. And the 2 of their volunteers were killed that day. They ran down to the border. 2 of them were taken hostage. Others were wounded. Again, intensely personal. But the story I'm taking around is seeing the fear in the eyes of American Jews. I visited Columbia's campus. I visited Cornell. And the truly haunting thing is that the fear I saw in the eyes of those paratroopers is the same fear I see in the eyes of students on campuses. Jewish students, pro-Israel students who are locked in, who feel abandoned by their administration, certainly abandoned by their faculties, and constantly harassed. And that is also an immense challenge. And we can talk about it further later, how we meet the challenge of anti-Semitism in this country, which is quite extraordinary. And I'm telling you, as someone who grew up in a Sicilian neighborhood not far from here and was reminded the price of being Jewish every day, this is what these kids are going through right now, and so many other people too. We are engaged now in this question of the hostage exchange, whether it's going to go on another day. Let's keep in mind with whom we are dealing. Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's like negotiating with ISIS, it's like negotiating with Al-Qaeda. They will engage not just in physical terrorism, they'll engage in emotional terrorism. And what they're putting us through is emotional terrorism. They will change the list. They will delay the list. They'll try to play this out for as long as possible, because remember, what they want is a ceasefire. And they want to create a situation where Israel will have agreed to a ceasefire, and now we're going to have to renew the fighting again, and the world's going to say, wait a minute, you agreed to a ceasefire, why not have a 2-week ceasefire? Why not have a 3-week ceasefire? And Hamas will say, well, here, take another couple of hostages, and give us another couple of days of ceasefire. And keep in mind, ceasefire is Hamas's victory. Ceasefire is our death. I'm not sure Israel is inhabitable after a ceasefire. It's so difficult. And so we're going to have to stay together and be very, very strong, knowing that at the end of the day, Hamas is not going to release all the hostages, knowing at the end of the day, we have to destroy Hamas. We have allies, not many. You know, the Kodesh Baruch Hu works in very strange ways sometimes. You know, they're going to give us he's going to give us a Darius, right? He's going to give us a Harry Truman. He's going to give us an Arthur Balfour. And right now he's given us Joe Biden. I worked very closely with Joe and his staff during my time in Washington, and I know him to be a person of moral clarity who actually really loves the Jewish people. Best Rosh Hashanah parties in Washington at Joe's house. But again, that night that he gave the speech, we all stood in front of our television. We didn't sit, and there wasn't a dry eye in the state of Israel. We talked about his personal pain of someone who lost a wife and 2 children, to our pain, how he unequivocally supported us, categorically condemned terror, and then did what Washington, the thing that was impossible to Washington. Remember, Washington, the one thing they agree on is not getting involved in Middle East entanglements. He sent 2 huge naval forces to the Middle East. And they're not just sitting there. They're taking down rockets that are out to kill Jews, fired by pro-Iranian Houthi rebels in Yemen. They're actually protecting us. Right? So that is reason for hope. But the ultimate reason for hope is because of you. Because of you coming out on a rainy night, cold, to listen to this. It's because in a crazy, insane, ironic way, we have to say thank you to Hamas. Because Hamas reminded us of who we are. Hamas enabled us to overcome all those differences that we had. Hamas reminded us that we are a nation. Hamas reminded us that we are people, that we're mishpucha, aravim zerazeh, aravim zerazeh. And because of that, no one could ever defeat us. They haven't defeated us for the last 4,000 years. They won't defeat us now either. We're going to win this. What winning looks like, I can't tell you, but I know what it doesn't look like. Right? I know what defeat looks like. Defeat means in Israel where we cannot look our children in the eyes and say, we'll send you to the army knowing that the state will do everything to bring you back should you fall prisoner, and that the state will do everything that you can sleep silently at night and not be fearful that a terrorist is going to break into our house and kill your parent. Those are the 2 goals. That's not going to happen. We're going to win. We're going to rescue everyone we can possibly rescue, and we're going to defeat Hamas. We are. I know it. I know it. But it's because of you. You give me the chizuk. You give us all. And I don't represent the state of Israel anymore. I got to tell you, I'm not an ambassador. I'm not a member of Knesset. I'm not a deputy minister. I'm just me, and I want to say that I speak for all the people of Israel. And saying to each and every one of you, Toda Rabba. Toda. Kevlin.
Okay, questions?
Yeah, questions, please.
We're going to open up for questions. Mind you, there are a lot of people here, and we don't have so much time, but we'll take as many as we possibly can.
Please, go.
In media war, what do you think of this fellow Douglas Murphy?
He's great. He's great. You know, I think of Douglas Murphy in the media war. Listen. Murray, I'm sorry. I Irished him. Those of you interested in following what I write is I have a Substack called Clarity, which is managed by this extraordinary young woman named Aviva Schreiber, somewhere out there. There's the Schreibers, yes. She's amazing. And I called it Clarity because it's the quality I most value in statespeople. It's very rare because there's a tremendous amount of fog out there. God, there's fog, right? And someone who could see through the fog. Now, even I talk about Joe Biden. Okay, Joe Biden has great moral clarity. I think it's because he's a religious Catholic. You know, every line. If you sit with Joe Biden for long enough, every line he says begins. Every story begins with "as my father used to tell me." As my father used to say, and he's got the best one he has is my father used to say, "Never crucify yourself on a small cross." He's crucifying himself on a cross. Look at his poll numbers going down, especially in Michigan and in Minnesota. We are the cross. The Jewish people are the cross. The state of Israel is the cross. That's very, very rare. So, you know, Murray has clarity, but most people don't. And what you're dealing with the press, in the best of cases, you're dealing with foggy vision all the time, a deeply foggy vision. How about the Washington Post headline yesterday? Okay, all right. Hamas and Israel in a prisoner exchange. Is it that? And I'm saying let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They didn't do this out of any nefarious instinct. It's just that they're blind. If they can't see the difference between terrorists, some of whom stabbed people as recently as 2 weeks ago, and innocent 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 9-month-old children snatched from their parents. In many cases, the parents were shot and held for 7-8 weeks in darkness and starved. Okay, not to see that distinction is not just sort of criminally blind. It's morally abhorrent. That's what it is. It's morally abhorrent. That's what I mean by not seeing clearly. And this is a moment that calls for clarity. It just does. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
First of all, thank you for your presentation and for coming to address us. Israel learned that they can't just mow the lawn and contain Hamas. Do you think that the international community now, our allies, has learned the same lesson and has the message that we can't contain Iran, but we actually have to prevent them from getting a nuclear arm? And what do we do about Hezbollah when the people won't go back to the north unless there's no skirmishes? Okay. What do we do with Lebanon and Hezbollah not to contain them either? How do we deal with that?
Okay, that's about 4 questions, okay? Our allies are with us for the time being. The administration's under tremendous pressure. And not everybody in that administration feels the way the president does. All right? Some of them are saying, wait a minute, our jobs are on the line here. Israel jobs. And we've seen them begin to waver. I mean, this whole cause, their calls for a pause, humanitarian pause, was a bit of a blink now, wasn't it? And now the president today says, hope this ceasefire can go on. A bit of a blink. He is saying, to his credit, that Israel has to continue to destroy Hamas. And I hope he will continue to do this. We have to give him gav. We have to give him back. Tailwind, as it's called in diplomacy. It's important. Interestingly enough, some of our staunchest supporters, though they don't often say it, are, of course, in the Arab world. Okay, because in the Arab world, particularly the rulers of the Gulf, are caught in a terrible bind. They have to face Sunni extremism in the form of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Shiite extremism in the form of Hezbollah in Iran. And there's only one country in the Middle East that's standing up to both of them. So their populations are rabidly anti-Israel, so they have to sort of pay lip service to that. But you don't see anybody cutting off the Abraham Accords now, do you? Not yet. And actually, Saudi Arabia recently blocked an attempt to boycott us. How about that? And then there's the French. The French. French being the French. Okay, Macron's going to say, don't hurt the ladies, don't hurt the babies. I don't know if that rhymes in French. But But France has outlawed pro-Palestinian demonstrations. You don't see I had a huge demonstration outside my hotel in New York last week. Vast. You don't see that in France. Because they know if we lose, they're next. The British know it too. We lose, they're next. Can you imagine what the Islamists will do in France if we lose? Right? They know. They're not stupid. So that's that. But we can't rely on it. At the end of the day, we maybe just have to do this alone. And by the way, it won't be the first time. We were alone in 1967. We were pretty much alone in 1948. Won't be the first time we have been alone. Hezbollah. Cards on the table. Again, if you read Clarity, and now you're all going to go read Clarity, one of the first articles I published there was an article called Imlo Akshav, which was from an article that I wrote in Times of Israel and in the Israel Hayom. I write for the Israeli press, and it asked the question: why don't we contain Hamas? Because they're not going anywhere. Keep hitting them from the air, the ground, the sea. Contain them and pivot to Hezbollah with our army. Hezbollah is 15 times the threat that Hamas is. 150,000 rockets. They're bigger rockets, longer range rockets, more accurate rockets. 100,000 terrorists who have spent the last decade massacring Syrians and practicing on what they're going to do to us. And as you said, how do you send people back to Kiryat Shmona? How do you send them back to Metula? Knowing what the terrorists can do, knowing that no wall is impregnable. How do you do that? And so this came up for a vote in the government. At first, when this came out, I was kind of ridiculed on Israeli television, but it turns out that our defense minister thought just as I did and brought it up for a vote, and Netanyahu and some other ministers turned it down. The United States did not want it. Okay, keep in mind, I've said a lot of nice things about Joe. I love Joe. But America bears a lot of responsibility for what's happened by building up Iran over the course of 15 years. And those aircraft carriers, which are definitely taking down rockets fired at us, are there as much to deter us as they are to deter Hezbollah, because they don't want us turning to Hezbollah. I still think today we should pivot. We should freeze the situation in Gaza and go and deal with Hezbollah, because we're going to have to. We're going to have to. I don't know how we can go back to status quo ante. It just doesn't work. So, have I answered all your questions, Iran? I've been a long-time critic of our government's policy about Iran. Just a long-time critic. I don't understand why, for the last 15 years, we've played by Iran's rules. Okay? Iran sends their proxies to shoot at us, and we shoot back at the proxies. And as I said before, not only the proxies get credit for shooting at us, we get branded as war criminals for shooting back. All right? I do not understand why every time there's a rocket that goes over our border, we don't take out an oil facility in the Persian Gulf. I mean it. Makes no sense to me. We play by the rules, and I don't think we should play by the rules this time either. I won't go further on that. All right, please, someone from the right. Yes.
What's your prophecy for the day after victory?
Yeah.
What happens in Gaza?
Yes, I just wrote an article for Sapir, if you get this. This is Brett Stevens' article. He asked me that question. So here it is. I'll give you the one-foot version. You don't have to read the article. It's this. First of all, demilitarization. What is the future? What's the day after? And everyone wants to know what our end game is, okay? Apropos of Football Sunday. End game. Ready? End game is this. Demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. No more rockets, no more arsenals, no more rocket factories. A creation of a strip around the Gaza, about 2 miles deep. No one gets near the border anymore. A cordon sanitaire. In the internationalization of Gaza, so it won't be just an Israeli problem or even an Israeli-Egyptian problem. It's clearly not just our problem, because that's what the 2 aircraft carriers are doing there. Okay? It's clearly an international problem. So let's internationalize it. We have to de-homicide it. And that's going to be difficult, because you can kill Hamas, but you can't kill the idea of Hamas. So according to recent polls, 83% of the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria support Hamas, and 65%, even among the refugees in Gaza, still support Hamas. So Hamas as an idea isn't going anywhere, but we know if we degrade a state like ISIS, like they had, then there's still ISIS running around, but it's not still the same threat. Listen, there's still neo-Nazis running around. But without Nazi Germany as a base, they're weaker. So we have to degrade Hamas in a way that even the people who still adhere to Hamas's theology, it's not even ideology, will be less of a threat. They will still be a threat. They will still be a threat. We will maintain security control over Gaza, certainly over the Gaza airspace. We will retain and reserve for ourselves the right of hot pursuit if we see terrorists, mounting there. But generally speaking, there are 2 sort of political moves that have to be made. One is the creation of an international force with a large inter-Arab contingency component to it that will oversee the reconstruction of Gaza, the building of a decent infrastructure. and hopefully the fostering of a Palestinian leadership. And here is the difficult thing. Okay, what are we going to do with the PA, the Palestinian Authority? Okay, Palestinian Authority, which is enormously corrupt, which is fantastically unpopular among the Palestinians. That's why Mahmoud Abbas is in the 18th year of his 4-year term. He won't stand for re-election. He knows that Hamas is going to win. What, are you going to start moving him to Gaza? You can't do that. So you can say that a very much reformed, okay, and overhauled Palestinian Authority might be the partner for Gaza. Might be. I don't know. It's premature to say, but clearly we're going to need some type of Palestinian leadership there that's not going to be devoted to killing us and actually interested in the future of their children and grandchildren. That may be the biggest challenge we face, I would say. Because I can tell you we can get an international force. I can say we can demilitarize. We can do everything I talked about tonight, except for that. That I can't guarantee. That I have to put under the rubric of hope. Of hope. And it's just that, the hope. We'll get some people in the back. Mm-hmm.
Firstly, thank you so very much for a wonderful presentation. And thank you for gracing our shul tonight.
Well,
You spoke favorably about President Biden and how he's been so gracious to Israel over the last few weeks. But he speaks very much about the so-called two-state solution,
yeah.
as does England and France and so many others.
Everyone does.
What is your feeling as to the survivability of Israel were that to be implemented?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a very complicated question. That's true. I asked before whether Jason Greenblatt is a member of this shul. Apparently belongs to the shul you don't go to, right? Down the street. Don't go dead end. So we just finished an article today for the New York Times. I don't know if the Times is going to publish it because we're us. But it actually talks about the Trump peace plan. So I've been involved in the peace process. I was an advisor to Rabin. I was involved in the last round of negotiations with the Palestinians, and I was an advisor on the Trump White House peace plan. It was actually the best peace plan we ever had. It's the only one that actually that conformed to reality. The other peace plans were up in the stratosphere somewhere, and it was a good peace plan. Even though it was a two-state solution peace plan, it had so many conditions on it. The Palestinians had to democratize. They have to stop paying salaries to terrorists in jail. They have to do an end of claims, end of conflict. There are many things that if Palestinians did all these things, and frankly, if I sprouted wings and flew, this would work, okay? I think tactically it's important that we say we're open to peace. Tactically. Again, it's all about time and space, friends. It's all about time and space for the idea. And to give people who are supporting us and opposing a ceasefire. Because what's wrong with a ceasefire? Ceasefire is wonderful. It's so good. People stop killing each other. It's a hard position to defend. We have to gain that time and space. I have a new book out called Israel 2048. We were talking about it earlier. It's a project I began in the Prime Minister's office. It looks at what Israel should look like on our 100th birthday, which is 2048. The book came out in Hebrew, English, and Arabic. And available, published by Oren Press. Many of you know Matt Miller. And the longest chapter in this book is about the peace process and draws on my, alas, many decades of experience in the peace process. And the premise, and I'll give you again the one-foot version. I still want you to buy the book, but here's the one-side version is this. The two-state solution is utterly, utterly impossible. Not just because of Israeli politics. Really, that's not the least. The problem is that there are thousands of peoples in the world. Thousands. Very few of them are capable of sustaining a nation-state structure. Very few of them. And I can deduce not a shred of evidence over the last 120 years that the Palestinians are capable of sustaining a nation-state structure. They can't even do it in Gaza. We couldn't even give them a nation-state. That fell apart. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, ISIS. They can't even do it there. And, that is the basic problem. I used to say to John Kerry, who was running back and forth trying to make peace, I said, our problem is not that the Palestinians aren't a people, it's that there are not enough of the people. And that's the fundamental reason why there won't be a two-state solution. I'll never forget, you remember Sai Barakat? Alav lo shalom? At one point in these negotiations, he turns to me and he says something I'll never forget. It's one of these moments where they say in Hebrew, Nafala Simon. Okay? Where you realize that you spent 20 years in university wasting your time because you understood nothing about this conflict until this man said the following thing. He said, you Israelis want us to recognize you as the Jewish state. Don't you understand by doing that we'll be negating our identity? Negating our identity. And suddenly you realize this is not about Jerusalem, this is not about settlements, it's not about borders. It's about they wake up in the morning and they are Palestinians because they're not us. We wake up in the morning and we're Jews and we're Israelis, not because we're not Palestinians. And so by making peace, they'll disappear. Peace is existential for them. Think about this. And you realize this in a moment and suddenly, what are we talking about here? So, I'm not, it's important tactically we say we're open to peace. Let's be open to peace. But let's be realistic. And the truly tragic thing is that because everyone's so set on the two-state solution, they can't think of other ways of moving forward. There's trusteeships, there are federal arrangements. There is cantonment on a Swiss model. We can do many, many things that would improve the situation. The two-state solution is going absolutely nowhere. A last word on this, and then I'll get to other questions, and that is, I said there are very few peoples in the world capable of sustaining a nation structure. You can take Jews from 70 nations in the world who don't speak a common language, who don't have a common culture, who have a common faith and tradition and memory. You can stick them in a country with no natural resources, surrounded by adversaries, and we're going to create this. Because guess what? We actually are a people. We really are a people, and we're not just any people. All right, next. I want to feel that I'm calling on women, because all you guys are raising hands. There we go. Here we are.
Do you think Hamas expected the military response that Israel did?
No, I don't. And it's something I actually want to write about. I understand. I learned, because I spent many years in Israel, I missed television in the 70s and the 80s here. But I understood there was a term that rose out of the TV series Happy Days, called jumping the shark. I think it's the equivalent of what the British call the bridge too far. I think Hamas jumped the shark. I don't think they expect. I think we talk about how Hamas lulled us into a false sense of security, but we lulled them into a false sense of security because we didn't react. We didn't react through 5 rounds of fighting. And they didn't expect it. They thought we were going to do the same thing. Now, maybe they succeeded far more than they expected to. I don't know if they expected to go through all those fences and kill 1,200 people and take over 22 different settlements, though they had plans, by the way, to go all the way. They had plans to link up with Judea and Samaria. I think they weren't expecting, they're certainly not expecting this. And by the way, they may still misread us. I don't think they have internalized entirely that we are committed, almost irrespective of the price, we are committed to destroying them. Because they forced us to realize that this is an existential situation for us. So yes, I think that the case can be made was that, we lulled them into jumping the shark. And they will pay the price for it. Yes, please, everyone. Yeah. I'll get there. Hopefully everyone. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
Was the Israeli government or the Israelis in general surprised by the negative outbursts in the United States, and particularly the college campuses, on the streets? I mean,
No.
It is destroying us, and we're trying to figure out how to really combat this with a great deal of difficulty. But were Israelis also expecting this?
No. No, and even someone like myself spent a lot of time on campuses. I've been, I've been surprised, if not shocked. Okay, and it's this. I think that American Jews in general have 3 choices. You can fight, and you can fight. You can fight in sort of a Churchillian way. You can fight in the courts. You can fight on campuses. You can't get another dime to Columbia University or Cornell or Harvard or Penn. You can outlaw anybody who carries a Hamas flag or calls for, as far as I can see, river to the sea is an existential claim. It's murderous, and why people can chant that, and they can't chant death to all black people or death to all gay people. That's fine, but you can say death to all Jews. That's okay. All right? You can fight legislatively. You can fight in many, many ways. You can hide. You can try to take the mezuzah off your door and lock the door and don't watch TV. Don't go outside. Or you can move to Israel. There's a choice. You can. And frankly, We live in South Tel Aviv. We live in Jaffa, and we're on Rocket Alley. All the rockets that go to Tel Aviv go over my house, and we have an Iron Dome battery just to the east of us, and so they're met over our house every night. Boom, 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 like 3 times a night. I have an ADHD cat that is internalized. Every time the sirens go off, it runs to the mamad before we get there. It's the most extraordinary thing. I don't know how the cat knows this, and I would rather be in that mamad than being on a college campus today. I really would. I'd rather be there. So those are the. I want to say one more thing, and this is a very long discussion, but I want you to think about this. I think that talk about clarity. We're talking about clarity before. Wars give you clarity in many, many ways, and one of the clarifications of this war is for me to understand that in a fundamental way the Holocaust never ended. The gas chambers ended. Okay, the death pits ended. But the conditions that created the Holocaust still exist. Because what's gone on and what we're witnessing around the world is the mass dehumanization of Jews. That 1,200 innocent Jews, not settlers, right? Innocent Jews, women, children, could be butchered in the way they were butchered and raped and massacred. And not only is it forgotten, but there's this medieval anti-Semitic trope, which is that we have it coming to us. Because we're committing genocide. All right? Because we have the blood of innocents on our hands. Get this? Does this sound familiar? Libel. And so the Jew hatred that created the Holocaust is still out there. It doesn't mean, and of course the big difference between 1940 and today is Tzahal, is the state of Israel. And that is what we're fighting to preserve tonight.
The tunnel situation. Obviously, this has been built for years, and Israel must have known what's going on with the tunnel. But there's just too many.
Yep. And this is where, where the state failed. What can I say? The state failed. We didn't live up to our responsibility, and responsibility is a big word for me. And we knew they were building it. We thought they could be paid off. And now we have over 300 miles, about half the size of the New York subway system, going down about 200 feet. So deep that it cut off the water supply to Gaza. If you want to know why there's no water in Gaza, because they dug beneath the aquifer, and if the aquifer filled up with salt water. And it would be the easiest thing to do if Hamas if on October 7th Hamas came in and only killed Jews, but didn't take hostages. We could go in there and flood the tunnels the way the Egyptians do, with seawater. Or we could fill it up with gasoline and throw in a match. But we can't do that because of the hostages. And if they'd only taken hostages, we could maybe negotiate, free some prisoners, another hostage exchange, as the Washington Post would say. But we can't, because Hamas has caught us right in the middle between the two defense purposes, our raison d'etre of the Jewish state, to defend our land and defend our people. And we're going to have to do both to the best we can. Knowing, I'll give you a happy ending. Okay, this is a quote-unquote happy ending. The best outcome I can see right now would be similar to the one that the PLO executed in Beirut in 1982, where we surrounded Beirut. I was there. And the PLO we got a deal where they were taken away on boats to Tunisia. Remember this? Some of us remember this? Same deal. Let us get down to the last Hamas headquarters, the last hostages, and say, okay, you want to get out of Gaza free card? Get on a boat, go to Algeria, go to Libya. I can think of a couple of communities in New Jersey where a guy named Poldy would take care of them, right? And give us the hostages back. That would be the best outcome. Really. I mean that not in any light way. Yes, sir, I'll get you there. Yeah? I'm not getting anybody back there. Can you? Yes. I feel I'm being prejudicial to the gallery. Go ahead.
You mentioned the Hamasification of Gaza after the war part is finished. What do you think that looks like? As a historian, is the Denazification the precedent here? Is Germany and Japan somehow precedent?
No, because Nazism was an ideology, not a theology. And we're dealing with Salafist, Islamist Islam, okay, which is a major force in the Middle East and in the Muslim world generally. And you can kill Hamas, but you can't kill the idea. You can kill much of the idea of Nazism, except for a few crazy groups around. But it's much, much more difficult. And as I said before to the gentleman who asked, I was very honest. The one part of the day after scenario that I really can't guarantee is the emergence of a peaceful-minded, responsible Palestinian leadership, because we've never seen it. It's never existed, ever. It's sui generis. I can't look back at a Palestinian leadership. Oh, there was a model. The Mufti, there's a model. Arafat, there's a model. Mahmoud Abbas, there's a model. We don't have one. So we're really going to be, it's going to be, creatio ex nihilo. We're going to have to do something that's never been done before. And it's an immense task. Sir, back there. Boy, how we doing?
I've seen reports that the top four members of Hamas have hold ownership of one, I saw $11 billion or $13 billion.
Yeah.
Has there been any effort by America or the international community to seize those assets and then they could apply it for the benefit of the citizens of Gaza during a reconstruction?
Those assets are probably held in the Gulf, so they're not going to be seized. And if they're in Qatar, they're really not going to be seized. The Qataris are amazing. Here they're the primary backers of Hamas, and then they get credit for releasing the hostages. I mean, you got to give them you got to tip your hat to these guys. I am completely in favor, when this is over, of certain initiatives that I've heard about to cut off all American investment in Qatar. And that's very important. Let me get this gentleman's been waiting so patiently. How are we doing?
After this one.
Dr. Katz, of course.
Mr. Benshaw.
Okay.
Next one.
Next one.
To what extent is UNRWA culpable for what's going on in Gaza?
Okay, I failed to mention about the day after. UNRWA should never be able to set a toe in Gaza again. It's not just that UNRWA serves, the UNRWA schools serve as warehouses for rockets and other weapons, and that that the teachers are members of Hamas. That's the least of it. It's that the actual curriculum of UNRWA teaches Palestinian children to hate peace. They do. They talk about return. Return. What does return mean? Return means we go away. We disappear. We're dead. All right. Should not be able. That's very important. Thank you for mentioning that. UNRWA should never be able to set foot in Gaza again. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Thank you for coming. We are living here in America, relatively safe, although we don't feel quite as safe because to a large extent the difference between what is going on now and Kristallnacht is that the police here are still on our side. What can we do as Americans in terms of Jewish political advocacy or other actions to fulfill our obligation both to the Jewish people and to protection of Israel?
Okay. Before you answer, Ambassador, Ben Shoak is the president of NORPAC. I know there are a lot of questions, but we do have to end at some point, so I think this is going to be our final question. If I could just dovetail on that question. I've been speaking a lot, many of the rabbis have been speaking a lot about the importance of not just our prayers, which is of course a critical part of the formula, our visits to offer emotional support, but the importance of political advocacy and the like as American Jews. But of course, rabbis speaking about it is A, speaking from the outside as opposed to somebody who's experienced it on the inside, and B, people don't really listen to rabbis, if we're just being honest. So if you could please speak to that as a closing note, I think that would be really important for all of us.
Okay, a couple of closing notes if I could. And one is this. Okay, you have many options to fight. You do. I mentioned the legislative. If there is a congressman or a senator or any representative, whether it be at the local, state, or federal level, who is not backing the state of Israel, is not backing our right to defend ourselves and our right to survive. Okay? That's what we're talking about here, nothing less. You can stand up, and you can stand up through this wonderful organization of NORPAC. You can stand up by going through political organizations not necessarily lobbies, but political organs, even like the Democratic National Committee. There's many things, venues you can apply those pressures. Do not let the press get away with what they get away with. If someone uses the M word, militants, to describe Hamas, that is anti-Semitic, because there's only one reason why they'd be called militants. Because if anybody else did what they did to those 1,200 Israelis that day, they'd be called terrorists. And the only reason they're called militants is because their victims are Jews. If they quote the Gaza Health Ministry as a credible source, okay, like the ISIS Health Ministry and the Al-Qaeda Health Ministry, that's anti-Semitic. Because the only reason is because Hamas has an enemy called the Jews. The only reason, but call them out. Do not go quietly in that way. Support your young people on campuses. Do not give a penny to the universities that do not protect their Jewish populations. Do not. All right? Why you don't have that problem, but other people have that problem. And you can fight. You can support the state of Israel in so many different ways. And I know, what do we have, 50 or 60 people on this show who have children and grandchildren in the IDF? That's amazing. Support them. Support his Hatzalah. Support Friends. There's so many different organizations. Crucial. Don't hide. Actually, hide is kind of ludicrous because hiding is actually not an option. Actually, not an option. This is a moment. History can be hard. History can be incredibly hard. But as anything I've learned as an historian, as anything I've learned living in Israel for close to a half a century, is that history holds out hope. Always. Always. You know, I moved to this country, that country, the other New Jersey, at a time when Israel was a poor country. Our largest export item was orange juice. Not kidding you. Where we had no relations with China, no relations with India, no relations with the Soviet bloc, those 12 countries, no relations with Africa. They cut off relations with us after the Arab oil boycott, 1974. No relations with South America. A nice relationship with the United States, but not a strategic alliance with the United States. No peace with Egypt, no peace with Jordan, no Abraham Accord. That was Israel when I was there. 3 million Jews imprisoned behind the Iron Curtain. 100,000 Ethiopian Jews trapped in Ethiopia. In my lifetime, I have seen miracles. Miracles. And I think all of us here, and I know I speak for all of us here, we believe, and we know this doesn't happen by accident. We don't. And as an historian, I know that we came into being in May 1948 really with nothing. Really with nothing. And we created this. Created a country with an army that's more than twice as large as the British and French armies combined. And that army actually fights. Okay? 1 out of every 10 Israelis tonight is in uniform. Isn't that amazing? It's equivalent of about 35 million Americans going off to battle. Never happened. A country with, I can go on, I can rattle off the statistics. You know them, the 7 universities, the cherry tomatoes. You know all this stuff. But truly one of the most extraordinary accomplishments in the state of Israel that doesn't get mentioned is that there may be 5 countries in the world that have never known a second of non-democratic governance. And you're in one of them. The other one's to the north in Canada, New Zealand, Australia. That's about it. We're on that list. And we're the only country on that list that's never known a second of peace. What kills democracies over and over again is war. Look what we're going through, and we are unremittedly, flagrantly democratic. That's extraordinary. Extraordinary. So when I say that history can be hard, but history holds out hope, I come with a perspective of Israel's history. I come with my personal history. Of course we're going to win. It's going to be costly. It's going to be painful. But that's the hope that our history, the Jewish people's history, holds out to us. And not just today, and not just since 1948. For 4,000 years. In that Parashah, we see how Jacob was afraid of his brother. And it turned out okay in the end, didn't it? Sort of. For the time being. History, hard. History has hope. You, all of us, we are the hope. Tada.
Thank you, Ambassador Michael Oren.